In this lesson, we're going to learn about adding webinars to the LMS. First, we will click on the Content button under the Admin navigation menu. Select Add New Content. A wizard will appear in a new window. Select Next to continue. In the first drop-down that we see, select Webinar as our content type. Now we are going to place the webinar inside the TraCorp folder for demos, videos, and animations. Then we will click Next to continue. We will title this content My Fun Webinar, and we will make the description the same. For content code, we will list it as MFW200. Then we will select the Next button. In this window, we can select Prerequisites, but we aren't doing that this time. In this window, we are asked to enter in the following information for content. Webinars can be pass-fail. They can also be marked complete on launch, which is usually what we will select, because once you've launched the webinar, essentially you've watched it and completed it. We can also choose to take the webinar and bundle it with an assessment, so they have to sit in on a webinar and then take the assessment later on, and they'll have to complete the whole bundle to get the certificate. Now, with webinars, as with classes, we can let someone register for the same webinar multiple times. Or we can say that they can only register for one future webinar. Or we can say one webinar unless they are marked for a retake. So the two top options are the most popular, but typically we don't want students to take up multiple seats for the same webinar. So we are going to select one future webinar. We have the option to exclude UG admins from record entry. So if admins are going to be attending the webinar and you don't want them to be able to use the gradebook to give themselves completion, you don't have to. We will select Next to move on. Now, this is the section where we can mark other content complete when you complete other content. We're not going to do that today. We're not going to notify students or admins when the webinar is complete, and we're not going to have any other recommended content when they complete this webinar. This webinar won't have any associated resources to it, and we're not going to give a certificate to this webinar. There won't be any metadata notes, and in the last window, we see a list of the options we have chosen for this content. Now, when we create the webinar, this is just creating an instance of webinars in the LMS. If you want to add multiple sessions, let's say, for example, you are going to teach this webinar once a week, these sessions are added in using the Sessions Webinar button. You can find out how to enter a webinar session, which is a date and time, by referring to the training video for webinar sessions. This concludes our lesson on how to add a webinar to the LMS.